and it was just a hard hit. Steph Curry had 25 points in the first, but in the third quarter, hit this hook shot out of bounds. Doesn't count, but Steph remains the best shooter of all time, not only in-game, but also pre-game.
5 years, Broussard, mark your calendar. We'll do the top 100. In fact, I'm going to do it.
That's right.
As soon as we get to
it might be coming
time now for Nick to hand out NBA medals. It'll be on a Thursday. Paul George had it going last night in Golden State, finished with 29 and 11. But the Clippers couldn't stop Steph. Warriors get the win. No medal for PG-13. Nick, which three guys did it better last night?
All right, we'll go quickly here. Trae Young gets the bronze medal. He could have had a bigger game, but they blew out the Bucks, so he didn't need to play all that. I'm sorry, they blew out the Mavs, so he didn't need to play all that long. We'll get to the team blew out the Bucks in just a moment, but 19 and 14 gets you the bronze. Silver medalist, a lot of Tyler Hero preseason buzz. He answered the bell last night against the defending champion Bucks in just an annihilation, 27-6-5, and then the easiest gold medal we might give out all year. Steph Curry's 45 points, spectacular game, 25 in the first, in a really good game if you stayed up late for it. There it is, the podium from October 21st in the NBA. There it is, Jenna Wolfe.
All right, only a few.
Vince Carter, Dwight Howard, Kyrie, T-Mac, Tracy McGrady, Tony Parker, just to name a couple of them. Klay Thompson, another notable snub, posted this on Instagram yesterday. Hey, maybe I'm just naive in my ability to play basketball, but in my head, I'm top 75 all time. All right, Nick, who was, in your opinion, the biggest snub from the NBA's 75th anniversary team?
Yeah, I'm going to say what everyone's thinking and get ahead of what I assume will be the dominating story today about this list, which is the Sidney Moncrief disrespect must end. Let me tell you about the Bucks and the... No, okay. By the way, Sidney Moncrief should have been on the list. However, he was not the biggest snub. I don't know how Sidney doesn't make the list. Sidney, I'm here for you, man.
I love Sidney, but no.
Dwight Howard not being on this list is an indictment of the entire list. If we're throwing guys off because they're unpopular, then someone tell Rick Barry, because he's out too. This is an indictment on the process, and it makes it seem a little too much like the cool kids table at lunch rather than the most prestigious group in NBA history. Dwight Howard, 3 times in his career, was the Defensive Player of the Year. Dwight Howard, 4 times in his career, was top 5 MVP voting. Dwight Howard was the best player and the only all-star caliber player on a finalist on a team that beat LeBron in the playoffs in a series. LeBron averaged 38, 9, and 9. Dwight Howard had a 5-year peak that rivals 35 guys on this list, dwarfs the peak of at least 15 guys on this list. And I'm not trying to kick guys off, but Ray Allen made the list. He, of course, never had a top 8 MVP finish, much less top 5. He was All-NBA twice. Reggie Miller made this list. He was 3rd team All-NBA 3 times. That's it. He never once finished top 10 in MVP voting. Paul Pierce made this list. He was 4-time All-NBA, 0 Bruce or Wilds. I'm not throwing Paul Pierce off the list. What I am saying is Dwight's resume, Broussard, is not borderline top 75. It's borderline top 45, unquestionably top 65, and probably somewhere in the middle between 45 to 65. He didn't get on the list because Shaq's made fun of him for a decade and because people don't like him. It's unfair. And that is, without question, the biggest indictment on the list as a whole.
All right, look, I'm certainly not putting him on the list over Ray Allen and Paul Pierce. There's an argument for Reggie Miller, but I do agree with you that Dwight Howard was the biggest snub. I could mention Vince Carter. I could mention Tony Parker. But I do agree Dwight Howard's the biggest snub. And it's similar to Vince Carter because they both had like 8-year runs of greatness, of absolute greatness. You mentioned Dwight, a 5-year peak where he was a top 5 player in the league. In those 8 years was about a top 10 player. The problem for Dwight is that, and look, and I'm with you, Nick, the committee of voters is supposed to be above this. The casual fan could fall for, well, the whole second half of his career, he's been a role player. All right, and they may not even remember how great he was. And it started with an injury. Let's say that, too. It didn't start with him just falling off. It started with an injury in Houston, and he's never been the same player since. All right, but again, the voters should be above that. And like you said, he became viewed as this giant goofball. All right, but like you said, Dennis Rodman's on the list. All right, so let me say this, too. And I agreed with keeping all of the top 50 of the original 50 greatest players list on the top 75. It's hard to say I made top 50, but I didn't make top 75. However, there are at least, Nick, a dozen guys on the top 50 original list that really aren't top 75 players. And that's not era bias. That's guys that, if we critique them by what we do today, did they win much? There are guys on that list that didn't win much, especially as the number one guys. How long was their run of greatness? There are guys on the list that didn't have a very long run of greatness. All right, so there's that, but I don't want to rip any of the old heads. New guys, you mentioned a few. I'm going to mention one from the modern era that Dwight should definitely be on before, Dennis Rodman. And Rodman was great. He was a tremendous defender. So was Dwight. He was an awesome rebounder, better than Dwight. But Dwight was an awesome rebounder, too, very close to Dennis Rodman. And Dwight was light years ahead of Rodman in terms of scoring. And their era of greatness was about the same. Rodman had about 8 awesome years, like Dwight. I'm going to also mention another guy, and I wonder what your response on this, Nick. Anthony Davis. Now, if it plays out as we think it will, and maybe Davis wins more championships, maybe a finals MVP, it's different. But at this point, Dwight Howard over Anthony Davis all day, every day. Better rebounder, both great defenders. Anthony Davis scored more, but here's the thing. Dwight was the anchor, as you mentioned, of an NBA Finals team that beat LeBron. And Anthony Davis, in 7 years in New Orleans before he got to LeBron, made the playoff twice as the number one guy.
And
won one
series.
playoff
That's
series.
Right.
And the injuries. So I would put him ahead of Anthony Davis as well.
AD, listen, the AD Dwight discussion is closer than people give it credit for the totalities of their careers. Again, if the time stopped today, which is the point that you're making. Now, where AD does get some check marks that some of these other guys I mentioned don't is he also has top 5 MVP finishes. He also has a handful of first-team All-NBAs, which matter a lot to me. We got to keep in mind when we're comparing All-NBAs, up until the late 80s, there was only first and second team All-NBA. So a guy like Reggie Miller, who has 3 third-team All-NBAs, if you played an earlier era, that gets you nothing. But as far as time stopping now, here's an example of why I think this is so unfair, Wilds. Damian Lillard is on this list. I'm fine with that. It was very, very close. But Dame has, at this point, played in his career about as long as Dwight before Dwight had the fall off. Dame has made All-NBA 6 times. Dwight did it 8, of course. Dame